Hi guys, welcome to episode number 13. This is Haxton Knits, and I am glad you're here with me today. This is a podcast primarily about knitting. I am a crafter at heart, so I go down many a rabbit hole when it comes to crafting, and you're likely to see as many other things as possible, including homebrewing, crocheting, cross-stitching, sewing, weaving, spinning, whatever I get up to. Usually you'll see some snippets of life here in Okinawa, Japan. I think like a lot of you in the rest of the world, it's getting a little bit difficult to get out and about and produce content that might be interesting because I'm doing my very best to stay home. So this episode may be a little bit shorter than normal, but I hope still nonetheless entertaining. Let's get started, guys. All right, we're going to start things out with announcements, and this is big. Listen up, there is now a Haxton Knits Ravelry group. You heard right. I've been debating going back and forth about this because really I wasn't sure how much time and effort I wanted to dedicate to this podcast, but I found that the more I do, the more I'm enjoying, and I'm spending a lot of time thinking about the content. And one of my favorite things about podcasts and YouTube channels about knitting are definitely the knit-alongs and the make-alongs and prizes and giveaways and things like that. So I think it's time. I want to make that part of my channel and my life too. So if you want to head on over to the Ravelry group, it will be linked below. And to kick things off with a bang, we're going to start with a make-along. I know, you're excited, I'm excited. So I thought, what sort of a make-along would define my channel, my goals, what I want to share with you. And for me, it's all about challenging yourself. So we're going to call this the Challenge Yourself Make-Along. We'll have a little Instagram hashtag right here for you if you want to share your progress on Instagram. But I am going to go ahead and open up a finished objects thread and a chatter thread over on Ravelry. And my goal is for this knit along to run for about 3 months. I'll post deadlines up in the tops of those threads. And then I will draw winners for some prizes. Now, I am not a, hand dyeing company. I am not a knitwear designer. So these prizes are just going to be created by me out of love for wanting to share with all of you. And so what do you think? The Challenge Yourself Make-Along. Something that I've noticed, I used to spend a lot of time hanging out at yarn shops. I don't know if you know this about me, but I like to knit a lot. So I hang out at yarn shops a lot. And something I always noticed was that a fairly large number of people would come in and they would say, well, I didn't know how to do this next step, so I just put it down and I haven't worked on it until I could come in and talk to you, the yarn shop owner, and you can hold my hand and help me learn how to do this. And that's fine, but to me, it was like, man, there was some quality time that you could have been knitting and you didn't because you didn't know how to go find the resource to get the job done or something like that. And so what I want this make-along to be all about is challenging yourself. I know that could be scary, and I'm not asking anybody to make a masterpiece or something super complicated. What I want you to do is pick a skill or a craft or anything that's been really elusive to you or that you've wanted to do but have been shying away from doing because you're afraid maybe you won't get it right. I want you to pick something along those lines and go for it. I know that with like the lockdown and the quarantining, you're probably not going to have a resource right there available for you. You're not going to be able to go over to your friend's house or go over to the yarn shop and get someone who can show you how to do a thing. So you get to use your other resources, right? All of you are watching me on the internet, which means you have an excellent resource available to you, and that is the internet. So if you encounter a problem you don't know how to approach or you don't know how to accomplish, go to those resources. And if you don't know what those resources are, come reach out to me at the Haxton Knits group because I am great at pointing you in the right direction when it comes to helpful YouTube videos, helpful books that you might be able to check out. Like I don't know if you guys know, a lot of libraries are now letting you do like ebooks and audiobooks for free through apps if you have a library card. or whatever else might be available to you. Shoot, I'll even make a tutorial if I need to. But that is my goal for this make along. I want each and every one of you to pick something that is new to you, that you've never tried to do before. And I am going to use my weaving project that I showed you in my last episode as my contribution to this make along, because I have never done anything with woven fabric before, and I'm in the process of creating a shirt out of some of my weaving, which I'll talk to you about later in my works in progress then. So I'm excited to hear from you all. I'm excited to see all your projects, and I hope you make some crazy awesome things and hopefully push yourself a little bit outside your comfort zone. I do have some finished objects for you this week. As I mentioned last week, we just got through round 2 of Sock Madness, and I have some finished socks. Oh yeah, they're nice. You know you love them. Gosh, I'm a little peppier than normal today. I have been spending my time home alone learning how to make better espresso. I talked about this last time, and I'm sure that those of you who like espresso in this group, probably cringed a little because I started out making espresso out of my ground coffee, which was a terrible idea, and it was awful, and it turned out awful. And so then I spent about 2 days going down the rabbit hole of how to make better espresso, which turns out is all about the grind and the temperature and the tamp. Anyway, so I have been drinking quite a bit of cappuccinos and lattes and whatever other sort of creations I can create. Yeah, so I'm gonna explain my mood and attitude and general peppiness today on all of that. But here we go. So this pattern is called Braid a Lot, and it is by Dots Dabbles. And it is just absolutely lovely. It starts at the very top with a twisted German cast on, or German twisted cast on. And I think I mentioned this before, that in Sock Madness, none of the socks are ever just 100% straightforward socks. And that's good. That pushes you to try something new if you've never done it before. And so this pattern, like I said, starts with the German twisted cast on in this particular competition. If the pattern designer writes a specific cast on in the instructions, you have to do that cast on. So it's a good opportunity to learn a new cast on. Then there are Latvian braids. Here we go. Mine look a little bit funky, and I think it's because the yarn weight I was using, the 2 different strands were actually pretty different in weight. The first strand is this blue color, which is the Malabrigo sock yarn that I talked about last time. The second strand is just some Patton's Croy, which is quite a bit thicker than the Malabrigo yarn. But still, it turned out fine. I was looking forward to using up some of those little scraps of yarn, and I thought that it would be interesting if I could carry forward my colors from round to round. So if you remember, the qualifying round were these guys, which are the Wu Hin socks. And this was the Hugh Loco Backyard Chicken Collection. It was a set that came with a main skein and 2 minis. The first mini is this kind of charcoaly gray color, and the second mini is this sort of mauvey pink color that I used in these socks. So I thought it was interesting. I got to carry a little bit of that set forward. The next pair of socks were Diamond Duality, which you see here. And this is, of course, the Malabrigo blue yarn that I talked about last time, which I carried forward also. So I just thought that was a kind of fun way to tie all these socks together. I did see one of my team members has been doing it a little bit better than I have. Basically, it looks like she's using almost the exact same sock yarn for every single pattern, and as a result, they all match very nicely. But these guys, I think, are turning out beautiful. And I think it's enough. I think the little hint of carried forward color is enough to tie them all together. I'm not sure how I'm going to continue to tie them together in future rounds, because I'm just making use of the yarn I have available in my stash, and eventually I won't be able to continue the way I have, but that is okay. All right, moving on. So Latvian braid, a little teeny hint of color work, and I did fraternal socks here, so you can see the 2 different color differences in this color work. And both of these socks are different, so they're kind of mirror images, so you have a different pattern for each sock, which made for quite a bit of charts. And then of course we have cables. And this heel I have never done before. I'll have to put in the name of the heel in the bottom here. They listed it in the pattern, but it wasn't your typical heel flap and gusset. It was increases. So you start increasing to make a gusset. And then you turn the heel, but instead of just turning the heel, you keep going with those short rows. The short rows go all the way from the heel to there, which in effect closes up those gusset stitches. So this is a different heel for me. I've never experienced it before. It looks really nice, and I feel like these are going to fit really nicely, and part of that is because it's cables. Of course, cables draw in fabric and make a nice elastic sock. I really like any sort of sock pattern that has ribbing or seed stitch or some sort of cable to like pull in and really hug your feet. I think those always turn out really nicely. Something I did change was after I finished the round, I pulled the toes out and reknit the toes. So if you are participating in Sock Madness, you already know this, but you have to knit a certain size sock to make it fair for everyone, which in this competition is a 9-inch foot, which is just too long for my feet. So after finishing and getting approved, I pulled out, about an inch of the toe and reclosed it up. And I didn't, so this toe will look very square to most of you if you've knit socks before. The pattern was a nice kind of tapered toe like you would find on a sock, and instead of pulling out the whole toe and like sort of reworking that taper, I literally just pulled out till it was the size of my foot and bound off. This makes kind of a weird shape, and I hope that I don't regret that later. If I do, of course, it's not very much work to just pull this toe out and reknit it again. But honestly, I wore them around for a day or so and they fit nicely. The only weird thing is like trying to show it to you guys because the toe ends up curling in instead of making like a nice smooth taper. But that is okay. Here are those socks. The toes end with a graft. So you can, oh yeah, you can see it there. Man, I thought that my Kitchener stitch or grafting was so flawless that you wouldn't be able to see it on camera, but you sure did see it on that one. This one, not as obvious. You can't really see that, but I am a big fan of the Kitchener stitch. I actually really enjoy doing it, and I know a lot of people don't. I think I'm actually a little bit of a weirdo too, because when I close up a toe using Kitchener stitch, my first pass I don't actually even really close up the stitches at all. I'm just making the motions, and I end up with like kind of a gap like this, and then I come back and I use my needle to kind of fudge the yarn across the row so that I can make the stitches actually look really nice and neat and perfect. Because what I found was when I was doing it, trying to do it in one pass, I would end up pulling really tight and getting undersized stitches, or my stitches just wouldn't be even. And so I honestly spend quite a bit of time fiddling with grafted toes, grafted bind-offs in general, probably more than average, but it's soothing to me. I don't know, I enjoy it. So those are my round 2 socks. And of course, after I finished with my round 2 socks, I received a bonus pattern, and this bonus pattern is really pretty. So the pattern is Tick Seed by Melina Pipers. I'm probably saying her name wrong. I don't remember getting this many bonus patterns last year, and maybe it's, I don't know what it is, but we've gotten quite a bit of bonus patterns. So we've gotten the Tick Seed pattern, which is it's slip stitch and it's helical knitting both at the same time. So that was really fascinating to me, and I'm really thinking about casting those on. I have some self-striping yarn that I thought would be interesting with that. It's always hard in these in-between rounds because I really want to cast on the bonus socks, but I also want to save my yarn in case it turns out to be the perfect yarn for the next pattern that's coming, which is a little bit ridiculous, but I do that anyway. Yeah, and then usually by the time Sock Madness is over, my sock knitting mojo is gone because I've just like cranked out quite a few socks. So I get all my sock knitting done during March Madness every year, and then I usually don't knit any more socks for the rest of the year. But this year, bonus socks. So we got the Tick Seed socks, we got the Lizelle socks, and they're just gorgeous twisted stitch or twisted cables. I love, love, love those. I always think they look so sharp, and I have not cast those on yet. The Luck of the Mods by JLE Designs, which is another beautiful colorwork, stranded colorwork sock, which you guys know I love colorwork. And then Diamond Duality was that was this one. So Diamond Duality, Woo Hin, and Braid a Lot. I'm so excited this round. It's just, this year's Sock Madness is turning out to be a lot of socks that I really like. I have kind of looked back over the years, and some years I am not really jiving with the patterns, and some years I am. I know a couple of years back it looked like there were kind of these experimental socks where there's a lot of modular knitting and a lot of unique construction. And then last year there was quite a bit of lace, and it just wasn't as much my jam. I knit lace and I enjoy lace, but it's not not something I like in socks very much. So this year so far it's been color work, which I love, beautiful elegant cables, which I love, and these guys are super woolly, and I'm really excited for the next round. So as of me recording this, it's the 16th. I think we've got like 3 or 4 days until this round is over, and man, I did not think I was gonna make it through this round. So the pattern dropped and I did not even notice. I had 2 very hard days at work. Never even occurred to me to open up my computer or my email or anything to look and see if the patterns had dropped. And so on my next day off, I saw all the chatter about the pattern and just thought, oh, I'm already 2 days behind. So last year when I was on the faster team, there was no way they would have all finished, and I would have never been able to keep up. So I am glad that I asked for a little bit of a slower team or a step down this year. So yes, I got started knitting on them, and then I had another 2 very hard days at work where I did no work on them at all. So all in all, it took me about 7 days to complete these socks compared to my normal about 3 days, but they're great, and I made it through, and I was accepted on to the next round, and so I'm really excited to see what next round socks are gonna be. It has been a few weeks since I have shown my progress on what I'm calling the Great Tapestry. So if you have been watching me, you've already seen a little bit about this, but I had the idea of creating a knitted piece of artwork that I could hang on my wall, and then lost my damn mind and decided to make it huge, 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 huge. So the idea behind this honestly came to me when I was writing my History of Knitting report for the Master Knitters project, which you can check that episode out later. But when I was doing my research into the history of knitting, it took me down this sort of rabbit hole learning about the knitting guilds and all of those things, and what sort of the apprenticeship programs were like in those guilds back in the day, back in England and stuff like that. And one of the books I was reading about was talking about how when you were an apprentice with the knitting guild, one of your final projects that you had to do was to create a tapestry or a rug or like a wall hanging. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Like we don't see a lot of wall hangings or tapestries anymore. And so I just wanted to go ahead and knit something. Excuse me, I got fuzzy yarn fuzzies in my nose. But yeah, so I wanted to create something I could hang on my wall, and I daydreamed about this a lot, and I kept coming up with these really complicated intarsias, like that included embroidery and all of those things, and eventually I said, no, you know what, let's just stick with the type of knitting that I love, which is stranded color work. And so I found an image. The image is a tree pattern by David Mitchell Design. And I took that image and put it into Stitch Fiddle and started knitting this thing, which is hard to see right now, but I have gotten some progress on it. Probably not as much as you guys were probably hoping to see, but Sock Madness definitely slowed down my knitting. So this is, you knit it in the round, so you can only see a little portion of it at a time. But the start of the tree pattern, I am using 3 colors, which is unusual for stranded color work. Normally you would only carry 2 colors across the row, but I said, you know what, screw it. Rules are meant to be broken, and this is craft and hobby and art and not law or mathematics or science or something that can be not, you know, it needs to follow some rules. So it was a little bit of a learning curve for my hands just to get used to carrying the 3 strands across the row. I started, so what seems to be working for me is I'm keeping 1 strand in my right hand, and then I have 2 strands that I'm alternating between in my left hand. I'm a left-handed knitter who goes left to right across the row, so kind of imagine if you are picking with your left hand and then using your right hand to sort of pick up and put down the other colors. And that's working great, so we'll see how that goes. I have another picture that I've been thinking about knitting into a big tapestry also that would require quite a bit more than 3 strands, probably like at least 5. And so I don't know, I don't know, we'll see. We'll see how this whole project turns out when we're done. I am holding up a yarn bowl that was a lovely, lovely gift from one of my coworkers. I was totally surprised when it came in the mail. And so inside are just my balls of yarn for this project. And these guys are all living on my desk while I am working away on that. My next work in progress is what I'm calling the Woven into Madness project, and this is going to be part of my challenge yourself make along. So I showed you last week that I had woven some fabric and decided that I'm going to try to figure out how to make a shirt out of it. I started knitting, these are going to actually be sort of side panels on this. So this is just some long strips of seed stitch with the idea that I'm going to, oh, excuse me, break my thing. The idea is that it's going to be the join between these 2 pieces of fabric so that I have some stretch and I'm able to pull this shirt up and over my head. And then I've been thinking, okay, what do I do for the top of it? And I think I'm just gonna knit myself a little neckline and figure out how to attach it up here on the top. Originally, I thought my inspiration was from the Weekender sweater, which is a very square, boxy sweater. I thought I would do a similar kind of boat neck like Andrea Mowry does on her pattern, but I've been looking at the sweaters and things that I've made for myself in the recent future, and I haven't been happy with the necklines on a lot of them. So a lot of them, either it was a boat neck and I find myself, you know, doing this all day, kind of fighting with it because it feels like it's strangling me, or it's sort of a big scoop neck and I always feel like it's just too wide of a neck. It's like falling off my shoulders or something like that. So I thought I'm gonna make a crew neck on this one, and I've not written any patterns for sweaters before, so a crew neck will be an interesting thing. Let me get you my reference. I remembered from doing my Master Knitter program, I mentioned this a lot, but I had to dig into a lot of books while I was doing the program. So when I think of something, you know, it comes back to me, it's always because of that program. But this is Vogue Knitting. This is the older version. Actually, I really like the newer version. So the new version of this book, it's got all the same content that's in here as far as I can tell, but it's also got some new content like there was a whole section on shawl shaping and like shawl design that I really thought was interesting that's not in this book. But I remembered this whole section on sweaters, and it shows you kind of schematics on how to make different types of sweater shapes and collars. And collars, yes. So that was thought 1, is using my reference to try to make a crew neck. And what I basically thought was basically I'm going to pretend this grid line right here is the top of that weaving, and I'll just knit this top part and then sew it onto my weaving to create the body of this sweater. So what I've got going on right now is I just did a gauge swatch in the yarn I want to make that crew neck or that neck part with. It's currently drying, and then I get to do some math. I'm very concerned about how the knitted fabric joins to the woven fabric, because weaving, it just doesn't have the same sort of stretch that knitting does. It's not stretchy at all in comparison to knitting, and so I didn't want to have a yarn have like a funny gather or bunching or something where that connects. So I want to make sure that my gauge is very precise and after it has been washed and blocked, so that I can pick up the right number of stitches along that line and make a nice smooth line. So that's a work in progress. Who knows how far it'll go or when it'll get finished. I'll keep plugging away on that with my make along. And then last but not least on my works in progress, well, I'm lying. I have 2 works in progress, but they're not knitting. So number 1, you saw this last week. This is some Kivute fiber that I got at the muskox farm in Palmer, Alaska. I de-haired it and I have started spinning it. Let's go on a field trip here. I'll show it to you. So this is my Shocked Ladybug spinning wheel, and I love it a lot. In case you're wondering, these Lazy Kates here, so the wheel does not come with any sort of bobbin holders at all, but there were some holes drilled into, excuse my filming here, drilled into the side, which happened to fit a US size 9 knitting needle really well. And so I literally just shoved some really long plastic knitting needles in there and some end cappers, and that works just fine. That's my makeshift Lazy Kate. This is my very sad amount of Kivute, but it's turning out a lot better than the last time I did any Kivute spinning. I am using my hand carders, which I am not super proficient at, but I am enjoying the process. If you guys have been watching now, then you've probably noticed that I'm a really slow spinner. So God only knows how long it's going to take me to finish spinning the Kivute fiber. I can only hope that if I leave it here on my desk where I can't look away from it, that I will get it out and spun more quickly. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But the plan is once it is spun up, I'm going to try to knit basically a smoke ring like the one that I shared with you before. I have a pattern on my Ravelry design page for that. A smoke ring is basically a very lightweight cowl that's long enough that you can actually pull it up over your head. So you can like pull it up over your head and then pull your hood over your head and have a really nice warm snuggly thing to wear. Yeah, because I need that here in Okinawa. Not even a little bit, but I will not live here my whole life. I do move quite frequently, and so in a few years when it's time to move on from this island, I'll have this lovely thing made that I like a lot, or maybe I'll sell it, I don't know. All right, I have one last work in progress this week, and it is cross stitch. I know that's a little unusual for me. So I mentioned this in one of my previous episodes that I was on a trip to, Seward. I was in Seward, Alaska, which is just a very cute little town. It's a pretty easy drive from Anchorage, so we would often go down there for long weekends and rent a cabin. And there was a small yarn shop there, which I enjoyed going to and shopping at. Every single time we went, I made an excuse to go to the yarn shop. And this one particular time, I just wasn't seeing any yarn I wanted, but I still wanted to buy something from the shop because I feel like it's important to support your local shops in any way you can. So I picked up this cross stitch pattern and I thought, well, I've done cross stitch, once or twice as a 12-year-old. So I can do anything, it's fine. And like me, I always grab things that are probably outside of my skill set or comfort level. And this is the kit that I purchased. And it's just lovely. I love this a lot. It's, you know, the northern lights and the moose and the cabins and the water, and it just, it felt very much like the stay that I was having in Seward at that time. It wasn't Northern Lights season, but we were in a lovely cabin. We had seen some moose that day. And so that was very nice. And I remember when I purchased the kit, the shop owner was like, oh, yeah, I looked in that kit. It's intense. And I knew right then and there that I was in some big trouble. So I originally spent a lot of time working on this and got only about, I think I did this strip and this strip done. So man, I bet I have probably already put like 50 hours of work into this, and there's still so much more to go. But this is where I am now. If you're wondering, yes, this is a moose butt. Right here, moose butt. So if I hold this up, I'm basically working on this quarter of the pattern right now. And man, it's taken a lot of work, and it is unfortunate that I chose this time to pick it up because I'm working night shift again, and that means it's very dark in my house. And so I'm using dark yarn and little needles and squinting down and doing my very best. But for now, I'm enjoying knitting it. I really like this kit. So the kit's called the Gold Collection Dimensions, the Gold Collection. And all the yarns that are smaller quantities come with these awesome little cards where the yarns are literally the yarns. You know what's on my mind. It's always knitting. The thread, the floss, whatever you want to call it, it's really in there. Like, I can't even pull these out. So I've been very gently snipping them out as I need them. And then of course the bigger sections of yarn floss come in here. So it's been fun. I've been enjoying it. I did not have a good game plan going into this project. It's so big. I've never done any sort of large cross stitch like this before, and what I'm used to doing is picking one color and using that one color all the way through, and then the next color, and then the next color. And I quickly discovered that that wasn't going to work because I was just getting lost. I would get off count somewhere and find out I had done something wrong. And so I've taken to doing it kind of in grids. So I'm doing two, I think they're 10 by 10. So I'm basically doing 2 10 block sections at a time. And that's turning out pretty good. Yeah, I have still noticed that I'm getting off in places. I see this like really stark line right here, which I think is just, I did something wrong. But we'll see. It's turning out well. Hopefully there'll be progress on that in the future, and I'll get past just moose butts. So this is the part of the podcast where I would normally start talking about life here in Okinawa, and I would be doing my best to find you some interesting content of things happening on the island, or historical sites, or jungle hikes, and none of that's happened. Nope. I am doing my best to stay inside. I mentioned before that Okinawa was a little late to the party when it comes to the coronavirus. We haven't had a lot of cases. We went several weeks with no cases, and we kind of watched the whole rest of the world doing their thing and feeling a little bit like, okay, when's it coming? When's it coming? And now it's here. So far, we have been blessed to be only a handful of cases here and there. The hospitals are not being overwhelmed or anything like that. That doesn't mean that that's not the face of things to come here. Like other parts in the world, there are bigger and smaller hotspots and zones and things like that. But we're doing our best to stay inside, to avoid unnecessary trips out if we don't have to social distance, and all of those things. So it's also a kind of a poor time to go to night shift, which means I'm kind of stuck in the house also, because what's open at night? Well, you know, clubs, bars, restaurants, things like that, and I'm not going to any of those. What's not open at night? You know, like hiking trails, parks, coffee shops, the things that I would normally be doing. So yeah. that's why I've been cross-stitching. I've been wanting to do this day in the life video, I think. Like so many people right now, I'm trying my very best to stay inside and not go out, and I thought it would be a good idea to just show you my routine, what I'm doing to keep myself busy. Like a lot of us, the first couple of days where we were supposed to be on quarantine or on social isolation or staying at home, I pretty much just laid on the couch and watched TV and knit all day, and after a day or two of that, I was just completely sore and stiff, and I just kind of felt gross and eating too much and sleeping too much. And so I thought I have about 4 days off, which is unusual for me, but I thought it would be interesting to just kind of follow me around for 4 days. So this is quick. I absolutely do not mean this in any way to be look how great I'm doing, or this is what you should be doing, or whatever. All of us, we get to spend our home time alone doing whatever we want, however we want to, and I'm choosing to make a video about it because I'm really bored. And so this is just a little side project. I would love to see some of you guys show me your day in the life while you are, trying to keep yourself busy at home and thinking about, telling me about how you feel and what things are bringing you joy and what things are bringing you sadness. And maybe through sharing this and keeping yourself busy with a little project, that'll help speed your day by and maybe ease some anxiety, because I know I've been having a lot of anxiety lately. So settle in, here we go. Fresh air before the sun sets. Social distancing while skateboarding. A little bit more anxious in life right around sunset, this kind of transition from light to dark. I don't know what that's about. I feel like when I'm an old lady, I'm going to be one of those sundowners, the old people that have a really hard time with dementia and things like that. Once the sun goes down, I can feel it in my bones. I'm already there. So this time of day is when I like to just take a moment and breathe. I have a bunch of very cute lights. You can see them there that I have on timers that start kicking in right around this time of day, just to help me feel a little bit calmer. And yeah, this is the time of day when I usually go sit on my yoga mat for a while. I'm having a little bit of shoulder injury. Well, I have a shoulder injury. And so yoga has been a little bit frustrating, and it's interesting because as we're on lockdown and I'm not moving around as much, I'm noticing I'm getting stiffer. The yoga postures that I once had a good grasp on are slipping out of my grasp. And then trying to deal with doing my normal routine without my teacher and with an injury has been really frustrating. But I'm trying my best every day to get on the mat and just, do what feels good that day and don't push myself. It is 7 p.m., means it's getting dark outside. It's time for lunch. Today Ooh, yeah. Good video skills. This is some leftover chicken masala that I made and some roast veggies and rice. Oh, my husband and I work kind of odd shifts, so he works swings and I work night shift. So normally I would be at work right now, but it's a night off for me. However, he is at work, so he'll get home, I don't know, around 1:30, maybe 2 in the morning. So once he gets home, that's when we'll do dinner together. I think we're gonna do taco rice or just tacos this time, maybe. My cat is desperate for attention and wants to go outside. Where'd you go? Say hello to the people. He likes to go outside, but I don't let him out this time of night because he yowls at all of the neighbor cats and makes a lot of noise. Today is a sad day. Today, I ran out of CO2 and now my kegerator won't work. How am I going to drink my beer? Okay, if things get really desperate, I can just take the beer out of the keg and put it in bottles and wait for it to carbonate in 2 to 4 weeks. Life tip for knitters. Eat these bad boys with chopsticks so you don't get stuff all over your fingers while you're knitting.